Gospel reflections for Maundy Thursday, the Mass of the Lord's Supper, Year A, 6th of April 2023. The Gospel reading is from John chapter 13, verses 1 to 15. The main focus of this Gospel reading is this: the Eucharist gives us spiritual energy to give ourselves totally in humble and sacrificial service to the needy, so that we become worthy to have a share with Jesus, as he says in today's Gospel. In brief, the Eucharist energizes us for a humble and sacrificial service. On Maundy Thursday, during the Mass of the Lord's Supper, the Church commemorates 4 realities. Number 1, Jesus' washing of his disciples' feet. Number 2, the institution of the Eucharist. Number 3, the institution of priesthood. And number 4, giving of the new commandment of love by Jesus to his disciples. The central theme of all the 4 is the same: to give oneself in service. Washing his disciples' feet implied Jesus' humble and sacrificial service to humanity. Eucharist is the greatest act of service he rendered to nourish us spiritually. Priesthood is a ministry of service in the church, and serving one another as Jesus served us out of love is one of the greatest qualities of the commandment of love given by Jesus at the Last Supper. By washing the feet of his disciples in the context of the Passover meal, which is his Last Supper with his disciples, according to St. John's Gospel, Jesus takes upon himself the role of a servant, since it was the duty of servants, literally slaves, to wash the feet of their masters and guests in Jewish society. His action of stooping down to wash the feet of his disciples was a sort of acted role play to demonstrate his intention to render humble service to humanity unto death, and thus accomplish his mission on earth. He wanted to teach us that the same love with which he sacrificed his life on the cross should be shown by us through our humble and sacrificial service. Though traditionally the symbolic meaning of foot washing done by Jesus at the Last Supper is explained as an act of humility from his part, John's Gospel indicates that it is more than that. The lesson he wanted to teach his disciples by a reversal of roles, as if they were his masters, becomes clear from his reply to Peter's objection to the washing of his feet. You do not know now what I am doing, but later you will understand. Chapter 13, verse 7. If it was a mere physical washing of feet to remove dirt and dust, or a mere lesson in humility, what is there to understand later on? Anybody can understand it on the spot. Here, the word later refers to his sacrificial death on the cross, his role as a humble servant who renders an ultimate act of service to humanity by his supreme sacrifice on the cross. Only later, when he would lay down his life on the following day, the disciples would understand how and to what extent they should serve one another out of love. When Peter said to Jesus that he would never wash his feet, he answered, "Unless I wash you, you have no share with me." Chapter 13, verse 8. That is, washing his feet was a condition to have a share or part with him. To have a share or to get inheritance, as the original Greek text says. With Jesus is to have fellowship with him, or to participate fully in his life, and to be his faithful disciple. Jesus instructs, in order to be worthy of having this share, his disciples must be willing to wash one another's feet as their Lord and teacher did. Verses 14 and 15. This is not to be taken literally, but to mean willingness to give or spend one's life totally in service. In other words, through the foot washing ritual, Jesus wanted to demonstrate that service-mindedness is a requirement for a faithful disciple. Service-mindedness is a requirement for a faithful discipleship. Since foot washing was done in the context of the institution of the Eucharist, naturally there is a close relationship between the two. In the Eucharist, we receive Jesus' body, which is given up, which is broken or sacrificed for us, or according to today's gospel, sacrificed for our service. Energized by the regular reception of the Eucharist, we too are called to break our bodies and shed our blood, that is, spend ourselves for the service of others, making it a sacrificial service. The Eucharist gives us the spiritual energy to be men and women for others, not for ourselves. Do we receive the Eucharist only for personal and private spiritual benefits and devotion and dissociate it from concrete deeds of service? What is service then? It mainly implies self-giving or giving one's life for the welfare of others, which includes a sharing of one's time, talents, resources, knowledge, and energies. Service or sacrifice are interrelated. No service, no sacrifice, and vice versa. Jesus' statement, "Do this in my memory," implies, "Do this in memory of my sacrificial service." Hence, whenever we hear these words during Holy Mass, we are reminded that our bodies, that is, energies, talents, time, resources, etc., need to be spent or sacrificed for the service of others. Today we need to ask ourselves whether we receive the Eucharist just as a routine or just for a psychological satisfaction, or take it as a spiritual energy to give ourselves in service. As Jesus' body is given up, broken, or sacrificed in the Eucharist for our spiritual welfare, we also need to sacrifice our bodily energies for others' service, making it a sacrificial service. Like Jesus, are we willing to stoop down, to heal, to care, to serve, to forgive, and to comfort those who are in need of this sort of service, this sort of services? We are called to live out our Eucharistic experience by doing the traditional works of mercy and service to the needy. Modern times demand newer and creative ways of doing works of mercy, such as not wasting any food, instead sharing it with the poor, serving water and energy, visiting the sick and the aged in houses or hospitals with a little food or fruits, sharing our space for tuition or studies of the poor children, etc. and etc. The Lord whom we meet in the Eucharist is met in real life when we wash the feet of the needy, that is, make sacrifices for their service. As long as we continue to do works of mercy in Jesus' memory, the Eucharist becomes the bread which comes down from heaven and gives life to the world. not only to us, as John says in chapter 6, verse 33. Do we try to escape from common work, community service, or make lame excuses? Let us pray to the Eucharistic Lord to make us more and more generous givers in service of others, a service which is a sacrificial service.